Hey everyone, and welcome to the St. Cloud State University Virtual Day of Percussion. I am Jenny Klukin, and I'm here to talk a little bit more with you about improvisation and the marimba. In my introductory video, I shared with you that improvisation was something that I grew up doing and loving in my home, and it really wasn't until I was in my 20s, outside of college, that I really started embracing improvisation on the marimba. I think it's something that is extremely valuable and under-taught in our music education systems, and I just want to encourage you to try it at home yourself. Usually improvisation is something that makes people really uncomfortable, and I totally get that because I have been there. I've been really uncomfortable improvising, and still to this day I'll run across something that's really challenging for me to improvise over, and I'm right back in that feeling, that scary feeling that improv gives us once again. So I'm just going to play with two mallets right now. In another video you'll see me do some improvisation with 4 mallets, but this was just going to be an introduction to ways to incorporate improvisation into your playing. So maybe you've had it where you've been practicing a lot of marimba and now you're kind of looking for a new way to warm up and practice. We spent a lot of time on scales, and there's a lot of different exercises, and there's a ton of music to learn. But what I think can really help us grow even more is a little improvisation. Think about the way you play the marimba. This is a very physically involved instrument. I always say we have a lot of real estate, especially on these 5 octaves. And we're never really touching the instrument that we play. We're only touching it with these extensions of our arms. And so it's kind of an unusual beast to tackle. It's very different than all other instruments. And so when we're playing, sometimes we get caught in what I call the marimba Bermuda Triangle. That's this triangle between our eyes and our brain, with the music, and with our hands. Now when you're learning repertoire, which is usually what you're doing with marimba, you're very focused on looking at the music and looking at your mallets. And usually we're trying to not look at our hands and our mallets too much, but become very engaged with the music in front of us and build a mental map of the marimba below us so that we don't have to constantly be looking at our hands. This is a hard skill to work on, one that we kind of are constantly working on. But I want you to think of another way about strengthening your skills. I want you to think about eliminating this third part of the triangle right here and just simply playing, improvising, and relating to your instrument, looking down a little bit, but not being so fixated on the page in front of you. And what I think this does, it kind of makes me think of, if you are going somewhere and you always go point A to point B, kind of like on your music. Start at the beginning and you go to the end. You get very accustomed to going that same way every single time. Now, if you're going from point A to point B one day and there's a big detour and you have to improvise your way home or to point B, you have to be comfortable enough in your surroundings to get there. And that's kind of how I think about improvisation. Learning music, obviously, is really important and really valuable, but being able to move around and understand the music enough to improvise within it, I think, is the next layer to really understanding the piece that you're playing, or just simply understanding music theory and really understanding your instrument. So, generally, what I like to say with improvisation is start where you're very comfortable and then you work your way up from there. So I'm going to start in a place where if you are attending a day of percussion, you have probably played a major scale on a xylophone or marimba. You've probably done that. Oops. Right? Now we're just going to start with the C major scale. That's what I just played. And we're going to start with an exercise that is pulled right out of George Hamilton Green, the George Hamilton Green xylophone book. I believe it's number 3 on lesson 1. And it goes like this. But I have played that probably a million times. I spent most of my freshman year playing that exercise in all 12 keys. That's something that you're really familiar with. So start with that, and we're going to kind of pretend that that's the melody. Okay, we're going to call that the melody. Now, when you play that, you might notice that you're sort of outlining 2 areas on the C major scale. There's this. Okay. That's just moving through the notes of a C chord, the 1 chord in C. And then as we move to the top end of that exercise, that's just moving through the notes of a G major chord. So what you're doing in there is you're harmonizing over C major, the 1 chord, and then G major, the 5 chord. Okay, here it is one more time. To 1. Okay, so those are the 2 places that you're harmonizing. More on that in a second, but now I want you to try, whether you have an instrument in front of you or not, I want you to try playing through that 2 times, and then I want you to improvise a little bit. And the only rule is that you just have to stay in C major, and you get some brownie points if you improvise within the C chord, and then you improvise within the G chord a little bit. Okay? Another way I like to put this is play that melody, and then I want you to wander around in C major. Now, for those of you who really don't like the word improvisation, wandering around in C major might just sound a little less scary. Okay? It's all a mind game, right? So I'm going to play our melody once, and then I'm going to wander around in C major for a little while, and then I'm going to play the melody one more time. Okay? Here it goes. Now, did you hear? It was just C major. There's no wrong note. C major is a great place to start because we're not managing any sharps and flats. I also tried to improvise kind of around that C major chord area, and then when it would have been moving to the G major part, I improvised around those parts. Now, if you're very new to improvisation, that's the basics of, that's one of the first steps in improvisation, is learning how to move around and have it line up with the chords that are harmonizing underneath you, okay? 2 chords to keep track of. That's a great place to start, okay? Now, you could do this in all 12 keys, all 12 major keys if you want, like B flat. Recognize this is the part I play the melody, this is the part I improvise, and then I go back to the melody. This is also training you to be doing that multitasking where you're improvising and you're keeping track of the chords going by, which, if you ask me, is one of the hardest parts about improvisation. You're trying to make something sound good, and you're also trying to keep track of the chords that are happening underneath your improvisation. Okay, so let's do a new version of that exercise. Let's do a minor key. Let's do A minor. Good old A minor. No sharps or flats. Okay? I did just regular A minor, that exercise would sound like this. Okay, that sounds fine. But I want to add a little sauce to that exercise. If I change the G and A minor to G sharp, it's going to become a harmonic minor scale. And it'll sound like this. Hear what I mean about the sauce? Okay, that G sharp just gives it a little, I don't know, I love harmonic minor scales. Gives it a little sauce, a little more energy, and a little bit more pull, okay? Now what's happening there, remember I was saying we were harmonizing the 1 chord and then the 5 chord and the 1 chord? So that in A minor would be A minor, E minor, A minor. But if I change it to a harmonic scale, it's going to be A minor, E major to A minor, okay? So what this is doing is it gives you a chance to throw in a new note on the 2nd chord in the exercise, okay? When you are improvising, well, let's hear that exercise in A minor one more time. Here's the E chord, A chord, E chord. So as you do this exercise and as you step into the improv moment of that exercise, I want you to avoid the G sharp during the A minor chord and really lean into the G sharp when it comes to the E major chord, okay? And that's going to start getting you to register, okay, I can improvise. Well, I would say improvise, if you're improvising through the scale, play a G natural during the A chord and play a G sharp during the E chord, okay? And this is going to get you incorporating a change when the chord changes. Instead of like in C major, we could play anything and it was going to sound just fine. But now, when the E major chord comes along, we need to boost up that G to G sharp. I hope this is making sense. Let me try it and listen along, and I want you to really listen for that G sharp coming in. I'm going to play it twice before I improvise. When it was the A minor moment, the 1st chord, I played a little G major or a G natural in there. And then when it moved to the E major chord, it moved up to the G sharp. And that's just changing the harmony underneath it. This is a very first step into understanding the chord that is happening underneath your improvisation. This is a really simple step into that. Okay, I want to show you one more exercise, and we're going to go back to C major because we love C major. And we're going to do, this time, you're going to be playing through, well, here, now I am going to be playing through a chord progression that has a little break on the end for a moment to improvise. The chords are going to be C major, D minor, G major, back to C. C major, D minor, G major, and I'll end on those octave Cs. You could end anywhere, just as long as it's those chords. Really, everything that I'm doing, you could voice chords differently, just as long as it's the right chord. Okay, so I'm gonna play it like this. You could do just as long as it's a consistent pattern and it's on those 3 chords. Again, C major, D minor, G major. These are all within the C major scale. Okay? Notice that's one measure, 2 measure, 3rd measure, 4th measure has a break. I'm gonna go back to my other one. That one was groovier. Okay, now this is a really common chord progression: 1, 2, 5, 1. Okay, 2 is a great predominant, 5 is our dominant chord, and we go back to 1. Classic music theory, classic progression. So it's a good progression for you to get comfortable with anyways. But it also really sets up a great little 1 measure fill. I'm sure a lot of you are drum set players, and this sounds exactly like doing a groove, and on the 4th measure, you know, practicing doing a fill. We're basically going to practice fills on a marimba now. Watch. This is a nice moment where you're just doing one small little improvised moment, okay? You have to keep track of time, you have to land back on C, but this is a really safe environment for you to practice just a little improvised moment on. And again, I would suggest going through the whole circle of fifths. Why not? Starting on C. Okay, did that. Go up a 4th, do it in F. Okay, then do it in B flat, then do it in E flat, and on and on and on. Go around the whole world if you want. This is such a great way for you to get really, really comfortable in every key. I mean, the other exercises I showed you too, this business, and then improvising in the key. If you can get into a key and move around in it, then you truly know the key. Okay? So I hope you'll try some of these exercises. I have one more video for you that I hope you'll watch. It's the next step to improvising on marimba, and I'm going to grab 4 mallets and do some really similar exercises just like this, just one notch more difficult. So I hope you'll join me there, but thank you so much for watching, and thank you St. Cloud State University for having me.